Hi you guys, so we're just going to do a couple review problems for a second before we move on to today's lesson. So we've been comparing fractions in the last 3 or 4 lessons that we've done. So we've done comparing fractions with the same denominator and with the same numerator. So when we're comparing fractions with the same denominator, notice that my denominator for both of these fractions is 6. So when two fractions have the same denominator, the greater numerator, our number on top, is the greater fraction. So, denominator, both 6, gonna double check that. Now I'm gonna look at my numerator. Think in my head, which one is greater, 4 or 2? Which one of these is closer to 6, 4 or 2? I know 4 is greater than 2, so 4/6 would be my greater fraction. And that's what we're going to be doing when you have the same denominator. When you have the same denominator, the greater numerator is the greater fraction when you're comparing those two fractions. Then, we also did comparing fractions with the same numerator. So, here are my two fractions. I have 3/8 and 3/4. Notice my numerator is the same for both fractions. Now my denominator is different. When you're working with fractions with the same numerator, the smaller denominator, so the fraction with the smaller denominator, is the greater fraction. Think about 3/8. If I were, my marker's not working too well, to draw 3/8, I would be coloring in 1, 2, 3. I still have all of this part not colored, but if I were to do 3/4, 1, 2, 3, I only have this little portion that's not colored. So, when I have the same numerator, the fraction with the smaller denominator is the greater fraction. And I know that 4 is smaller than 8, so 3/4 would be my greater fraction. Now I just want to do that review with you guys for a second. Now we can move on to today's new lesson. We're going to be doing the same thing. Our learning target is just going to be a little bit different today. So, our learning target today is I can use different reasoning strategies to compare fractions. Those different reasoning strategies that we're talking about is either fractions with the same denominator, the same numerator, or comparing fractions by using their missing piece. So for our first problem up here, we have Nora picks 3/4 pound of cherries. Ned picks 7/8 pounds of cherries. Who picks a greater amount of cherries? Well, first, I want to draw my picture. So, Nora right here, she has 4 equal pieces. 3 of them colored in. Ned has 8 equal pieces. With 7 of them colored in. Okay, so that's my drawing for both of them. I have Nora on the left, Ned on the right. This is where we're going to talk about this missing piece on each. They want to know who picked a greater amount of cherries. Well, looking at both of my circles, which missing piece is smaller? Who has more of their circle taken up? By looking at it, I can see that Ned's missing piece is smaller than Nora's. So I would say Ned picked a greater amount. But I also want to show that I can compare my two fractions using my greater than, less than, or equal to sign. So I'm just going to put my 3/4, my circle to compare them, 7/8. So just like I put right up here, Ned picked the greater amounts. So my 3/4 is less than my 7/8 because my missing piece on 7/8 is smaller than my missing piece on 3/4, meaning that Ned's circle, more of it's colored than Nora's circle. So the fraction with the smaller missing piece is always going to be the greater fraction. The smaller the missing piece, the greater the fraction. So that's where we just talked about the missing piece. Down here we have that little, like this little chart for us. Missing piece, that's what we just went over for this. Now let's move on to this granola bar problem. Ian's granola bar recipe calls for 2/3 cup of oats. So Ian right here, 2/3 cup. Sadie's recipe calls for 3/4 cup of oats. Whose recipe uses fewer oats? So now we want to know the fraction that's less than. Whose recipe is using lesser oats? Now, because we haven't really done our reasoning too much yet, I still want to draw a picture. Remember, it's always best to draw a picture just so we can visually see what we're working with. It helps a lot of people. I know that it personally helps me. There's nothing wrong with drawing your pictures. It's actually, Miss Baker loves that. It's super beneficial. So I'm going to do Ian's right now. He did 2/3, so I know that this is going to be cut into 3 equal parts, and 2 of them are colored because he used 2/3 of the cup. Then Sadie's recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup, so she's going to be split into 4ths. 4 equal parts. 3 of those parts are colored. So, just looking at this, I know that they look like they're super close together, but if you can really notice, Ian's goes in to Sadie's. So Ian's cup of oats that he used looks like it's a little bit less than Sadie's. That's what I'm seeing visually right here. But they asked me a few different questions. What fractions represent the missing piece of each whole? Well, looking at my visual models that I drew, how many missing pieces do I have on each? I have 1 missing piece on Ian's, 1 missing piece on Sadie's. So for Ian, I would say he has 1/3 of a missing piece. He has 1 missing piece out of 3. Sadie has 1 missing piece out of 4. So out of her 4 equal parts, 1 of them is missing. Now, B asks me, do the missing pieces, so what we put up here, have the same numerator or denominator? Well, we know my numerator's on top, denominator's on bottom. Our denominators aren't the same because that's 3 and 4, but our numerators are both 1. So our missing pieces have the same numerator. Now, let's look down at C. How can you use the missing pieces to compare 2/3 and 3/4? Well, right here, missing pieces, I've already worked with these. So I know the fraction with the smaller missing piece is greater. Which person had the smaller missing piece? So I would say that Sadie's recipe had the smaller missing piece, which means more of her fraction was taken up. There's more in here than there is on Ian's. So, whose recipe has fewer oats? Ian's does. He has the larger missing piece. So let's just look at that one more time. Missing piece, the fraction with the smaller missing piece is greater. Here's Ian's missing piece. Here is Sadie's missing piece. Sadie's missing piece is smaller, which means her piece is greater, but we were looking for the recipe that was fewer. So that is why we went with Ian's, because he had the greater missing piece. Then let's look at this last one right here. Beth's glass is 3/8 full. Leo's glass is 3/4 full. Both glasses hold the same amount. Whose glass has more juice? So, Beth's glass is 3/8. Leo's glass is 3/4. Both glasses hold the same amount. I want to know whose glass has more juice. So, which fraction is greater? So, I'm going to put 3/8 and then 3/4. I'm going to look down at my chart down here and ask myself, do they have the same denominator, the same numerator, or should I be thinking about the missing piece that they both have? Well, they don't have the same denominator. Their denominators are different, but they do have the same numerator. Both numerators are 3. So I'm going to look at my rule right here for the same numerator. The fraction with the smaller denominator is greater. So 3/8, 3/4. Which denominator is smaller? Well, 4 is smaller than 8, so I know that 3/4 is going to be my greater fraction because the smaller denominator is greater. So I would put 3/8 is less than 3/4. And if you wanted to see that visually, we'll just put it right up here a second, and we'll do, here's my 3/8, and then my 3/4, 1, 2, 3. I have all this left of my circle for my 3/8, and then 1, 2, 3. I only have this little section left for my 3/4. So if you can't remember these rules right off the top of your head, it is always best to draw that model, that visual model, for you to see just like the missing pieces or how much more is taken up than the other, and just being able to compare them. It's always best to see something visually if you can't picture the fractions in your head. So, for your math assignment today, what I want you to do is have a separate sheet of paper with you. Read the questions carefully. Make sure you're really paying attention to what those fractions are and what you're being asked. If you need to write this on your piece of paper so you can see it right in front of you, go ahead. Whatever helps you best. So I want you to remember, fractions with the same denominator, the fraction with the greater numerator is greater. So if they have the same denominator, the higher numerator is the greater fraction. If they have the same numerator, the fraction with the smaller denominator is the greater fraction. Missing pieces, which fraction has the smaller missing piece? Whichever one has a smaller missing piece, that's the greater fraction. So, good luck on your assignment. Let me know if you guys need anything. Have a great day.